Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Single Malt Review. What have we got this time?
Oh, sticking in Speyside, we're off to the Knockdhu Distillery for the anCnoc 12-year-old. Knockdhu sell their whisky as anCnoc to avoid confusion with Knockdhu.
It's sort of, not to knock it, but that's a lot of very similar sounding Gaelic there, and I get confused myself very often.
Bottled at a modest 40% ABV, which was for a long time the standard. Less common now, but
Arguably still the standard worldwide, but less so for single malts, although with a few notable and still very popular exceptions. So we won't count that as a knock against it.
it's artificially coloured and almost certainly chill filtered too.
Which is why, and through no real fault of the whiskey, it's sort of gone under my radar for all these years, because it's always been there. Not 12-year-old is kind of a standby of single malts, really. It's been available for, well, as long as I can remember wandering around whiskey shops, but it's always been something I've sort of looked at, picked up, and seen, 40% probably coloured, chill filtered, and sort of put it back, and, cool story, and move on. But no, I shouldn't have really done that, because having tasted this recently at a tasting, so tasting it not by my own particular choice, I actually thought it was a real cracking whiskey. So I'm glad you ended up with a real bottle so that we can really get into this, because, I think it's really quite fabulous. And it's fabulous right from the nose. It's really, really classically Speyside, but if anything, even fruitier.
So it's rich apricots, the brandy-soaked dried fruit.
It's a lot of fresh fruit as well. It has the
tropical fruit salad there.
Apples and pears of Speyside, but they're really, really mega ripe, verging on overripe, sort of, eat them right now type ripeness levels going on there. And there's sort of red and green apple in it. It's quite a diverse basket of fruit. And what really, really gets me is there is some of that so very rare these days tinned pineapple, which used to be, if you ever find yourself in the very fortunate position to be able to taste some sort of really, really old whiskey, not that it's old as in really, really aged whiskey, not 50-year-old whiskey, but whiskey from the 50s, so you're probably drinking, if you find an old bottle of White Horse or something, that is probably 8 years old, but the bottle is from the 50s, or maybe even before the war in some of the cases, the ones that I've been able to taste at particular tastings, you get this most remarkable tinned fruit salad, tinned pineapple thing off it, and it just seems to have died out. No one seems to really know from where that came. It may have been an old type of barley which has gone out of fashion, because barley is sort of reinvented every couple of decades. For instance, everything was distilled with Golden Promise maybe 20 years ago, and now that's all a more modern strain of barley. And whenever that happens, you do get alterations in the flavour of things made from barley, so whiskey and beer. But at any rate, this tinned fruit salad, tinned pineapple, far less common than it used to, and I think it's a really, really, really exciting flavour. So
I'm getting more of a fresh pineapple aroma here. None of that sort of heavy, syrupy, tinned quality.
And either way, it's a really bombastic, fruity nose coming out of there. It's very, very diverse, and it's very, very inviting.
That is readily drinkable at 40% straight out of the bottle.
As you would hope. You don't want that. If a 40% whiskey needs water, then there's something is awry with that particular whiskey. But
Lashings of peach juice straight up, like a peach nectar on my tongue. First off, bit of pineapple.
it's very, very, very fresh, very, very lively, vibrant. There's quite a spirity component there. For 12 years old, it actually has quite a lot of race in the flavour on the tongue, like a very, very young whiskey might have. It's less a case of tasting young, but I think more a case of retaining some of its youthful character. And the fruit in there is really, really dominant. There's wood here, but it's a very, very spirit-driven whiskey. All of that sort of fresh, ripe fruits you get off really, really good, lively new make spirit, they're all still here. They have gone nowhere. So I think this has probably been aged quite carefully without too much interaction with the wood. I'd say, sort of staring through the colour in here, I think this would be probably a very, very pale whiskey, was it to be uncoloured, because I think it's been aged in fairly well used casks. I think we're looking at majority second fill bourbon casks here, and maybe similarly some of the sherry casks which have probably gone in.
It's taking me some extra sips, but I'm getting into other flavours too. There's a little bit of sweet maltiness. There's also some more subtle fruits like a nashi pear.
There is a bit of sort of fresh barley, if you're familiar with barley water, which probably most people aren't these days. You're getting a bit of that coming through. A lot of barley sugar.
A bit of the tiniest amount of water just to see what happens.
But really, it is all about the fresh fruity characters with this whiskey, and of that it has in droves.
That little bit of water has brought out some gentle spices. Sort of like a lightly spiced Christmas cake or pudding.
It has, I think, accentuated some of the sherry maturation just a little. I think I preferred mine without the water, when it was just all fruit, that ensemble of fruity characters, but it's still a good one. There is really a surprising amount in here for such a, at face value, such a simple whiskey. It's just a 12-year-old, 40% chill-filtered, really what you consider a run-of-the-mill single malt. But were you to taste this against something that was really, really simple, like a Glenfiddich 12-year-old, and I mean, no bones about Glenfiddich 12-year-old, it does what it says on the tin, and it does it very well, but no one would call it complex. To hold this up against that, this one is night and day. There's just so much going on here at the same time. It's really, really quite fabulous.
And it's a very upbeat, tropical kind of a flavour too. Now, being in the southern hemisphere, Christmas is the season of long, hot days, and this is just such a perfect summery and yet Christmassy whiskey for our climes.
I'll have to call it Moorish too, because I've gone and I've finished mine. It really invites you back in to have just a wee bit more, which I think is always a sign of a good whiskey. The only wonder that this leaves me with is really what it would taste like if it was 46% and unchill filtered. But in this one case, and this is based on our terribly empirical testing with chill filtration and the tasting of, I really wonder if this is a particular whiskey which is maybe even a little better with the chill filtration, because putting it as an unchill filtered expression, you would get more in there, but for a whiskey with so much more, I think it might just end up being a little too much, and you would get that creamy, full-bodied character, which I think might run counter to what this is doing.
You might undermine what of that light.
This is all
sweet
about
fruitiness.
a light body and a crisp body. If you made this a weightier, heavier whiskey, I think you might actually lose some of the greater picture that this one is painting. So maybe quite a good example of something that ends up just a bit better for its chill filtration.
Maybe we'll have
really,
to try
who
some of
knows?
the older and stronger anCnoc releases as a comparison.
Because I have this one spurred my interest to go and see what else they do, and
Yes,
their older
decent
whiskies
range.
are they do get stronger as they get older for whatever reason. So we might have to compare and contrast, because if they're anything like this, they should be really rather good. And speaking of rather good, I should give it a score, and I'm going to give it an 87. It's a really, really good whiskey. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm in a similar field. This one rates an 86 from me. It's so accessible, fruity, summery, as I'm saying, perfect hot weather whiskey, or perfect Christmas weather whiskey for us down here. And it does those things so well. It's clear and expressive.
So there you go, anCnoc, 12 years old. For such a prescriptive-looking whiskey, it's really quite surprisingly good. So you can't complain about that. So you all keep safe in the meantime. We'll see if we can knock out a couple more for Christmas. And I think that was at least 4 knock puns, so I think I've done rather well. Slàinte.